The Endangered Species Act is being used by the federal government to take people's property. The ESA is more powerful than the U.S. Constitution. That frightening statement from Dave Sterling, author of Green Gone Wild.
The Hurricane Katrina story really begins in 1965 when Hurricane Betsy slammed into the southeastern coast of Louisiana. The 58 people who were killed and the $1 billion of damages done in 1965 were not caused by the hurricane per se. It was caused by the storm surge pushing this 12 to 14 foot wave, if you will, into the lake, and it overflowed the levees, and that's where the damage occurred. As a result, Congress appropriated funding to create two huge hydraulic gates that would cover those two passages whenever a Category 3 hurricane was coming toward New Orleans. And just before construction was to begin, an environmental group utilized the Endangered Species Act to go into court and seek an injunction stopping the building of the gates on the claim that shrimp and shellfish whose habitat was right at the mouth of the lake would be harmed when the gates closed. Now, of course, the gates would only be closed for a few days at a time. There was no scientific evidence to demonstrate that they would have been harmed, but as a result of their claim and petition, the judge granted the injunction. The project ended.
In 2005, Hurricane Katrina came to New Orleans along the same path as Hurricane Betsy, producing the same kind of storm surge, but this time killing more than 1,100 people. Stories of environmental extremism don't always end in death to humans. Sometimes it's just despair.
My name is Baron Knoll. I'm a resident of Klamath Falls, Oregon. In 2001, the Endangered Species Act changed my life. They took our water 100%, shut down our canals, affected the community, hired guards to keep us from our water, our own country.
The toll that occurred was massive amounts of depression, anxiety, suicide, at least 2 individuals, several heart attacks.
The Endangered Species Act is not here for the animals. It is strictly here for money or water or land. I don't understand, because when they shut our water off, they killed millions of birds. They flooded out nests, they dried up nests down in Tule Lake. They don't care about the animals. It's strictly another purpose. I'm not sure what it is.
We love the land. We want to take, you're probably asking, why don't you go? Because I love the land, and we think we're environmentalists by taking care of the land and doing that kind of land. And this is our home. It's not only our business. If you lose a business, you still have your home, mostly. And we lose both.
1,400 families lost everything when they lost their water, supposedly to protect some fish that weren't even endangered. Here is the story of the formerly endangered American bald eagle, symbol of our freedom, and how the American government has taken the use of one man's property, even though there are now more than 12,000 nesting pairs of bald eagles.
I had always kind of envisioned that I would retire on this property and sell my property in Minneapolis. And at the time I proposed this to the county, the eagle's nest was not occupied. However, I was told that the fact that an eagle's nest is not occupied does not mean it is not considered active. They consider an eagle's nest active unless it has been unoccupied for 5 or more years. I'm at a standstill. I can't do anything with the property. I sometimes get the complaint from people that I shouldn't be allowed to develop this because the eagles were there first. Well, I was there long before the eagles were. I grew up on this property. I spent my summers up here, and we never saw eagles for 50 years. The eagles have only been there about a dozen years. There are a lot of cases where people own a larger piece of property and then they can make some accommodation to accommodate the eagles on one part and then maybe develop part of the other, or then you get into the argument, well, how much is the property devalued by the restrictions? But in this case, the property is 100% devalued.
Paul Fisher and his wife Gail owned a home on Perdido Key in Florida. Hurricane Ivan destroyed it in 2004. Before the Fishers could get local permits to rebuild, the Fish and Wildlife Service declared their private property to be critical habitat for the Perdido Key beach mouse.
We didn't have a clue when we bought the property that there was such a thing as a beach mouse. Our goal was to remodel and update our house here. Ivan came in and tore apart the duplex. We were left with nothing.
It isn't clear that Congress ever intended the Endangered Species Act to be used to take away people's private property rights. But over the last 30 years, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has done just that.
And that's what we're dealing with right now. We're paying our mortgage payments, we're paying our property taxes, and we can't do anything with this property. And what's wrong with this picture? That's where we are.
Well, in the world we live in today, in this country, the Endangered Species Act is more powerful than the United States Constitution, because the U.S. Constitution, the Fifth Amendment, provides that private property shall not be taken by government without just compensation. And yet, when a species is listed, or when critical habitat is designated for a species, the property owner gets no compensation even though they cannot use their property. And in that sense, the Constitution just kind of been thrown out of the window. So it is important that people understand, and that's what my book is really all about, what is being done in the name of species preservation and protection, but very few people focus on what's happening to the human species.